We've shown you the projected records for every Power 4 team, and in this video, we're going to kind of wrap that up and show you the records for all the teams in order from most wins to least wins. And keep in mind, this is not a prediction. These are not rankings. This is simply based off of our projected record formula, and we are projecting the number of wins for each team with that formula. So we're going to show you the win totals. As I was going through these, I was thinking, it would be interesting to see which projected records had the biggest jump or drop from the team's records last year. So I might do one more video on this and look for the, look at the teams that have the chance to make the biggest jump or have the biggest decline from last year. Maybe we'll do that. If that sounds interesting, you guys can let me know. But again, not rankings, not predictions, just projected records, and we're going in order. And just going by the projected win total, this would be regular season wins. This would not include anything in the postseason. And there are some takeaways from this, and I'll kind of get to them. We'll start with one right here on the first page. So these are in order. I've got them just ranked 1 through 68. Some of them are tied. But again, we'll keep the numbers in order here. So Notre Dame's at the top, 10.15 wins, which means they have a really good shot to get to the playoff. Almost, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but the expectation is to get to the playoffs. Same thing for Oregon, 10.05 wins. So they're projected to get to 10-2. Texas right there at 10-2, 9.8 wins. Illinois, 9.7 wins. Yes, Illinois, the number 4 team here in terms of wins. That does not mean I think that they're the number 4 team. It's simply based off of their schedule. And if you remember, we did this all based off of our tier rankings. Illinois was not a tier 1 team. The other teams you see on your screen, these are all tier 1 teams, so they're expected to be at the top. Illinois was a tier 2 team, and you see them even ahead of Penn State, and you'll see them ahead of Ohio State as well. Those are tier 1 teams. That tells us that Illinois has a very favorable schedule, and when you look at that schedule, they've got Ohio State. That'll be tough, obviously, but I mean, the rest of their schedule, they could be favored in every other game that they play. They do have Indiana on the road. That could be tricky. They got USC, Wisconsin. They don't play Oregon. They don't play Penn State. Their big non-conference game is Duke. So watch out for Illinois to possibly sneak into the college football playoff. And again, they're actually projected here to go 10-2. So 9.7 wins for Illinois. That one really stands out. You see Penn State again, 9.55 wins. So they're right there on the edge. It could go either way, 9-3, 10-2. Again, based off these projections. Let's move on now to 6 through 10. You see Arizona State, 9.55 wins for them. And they're a tier 2 team. So another tier 2 team ahead of Georgia and Ohio State. So that means Arizona State, Illinois, those two teams have very favorable paths to the college football playoff. So keep that in mind. Georgia and Ohio State there at 7. Actually, both teams tied at 7, 9.25 wins. And then you got BYU, 9.25 wins, and Tennessee, 9.15 wins. So I said this in the SEC video. I really probably should have done more tiers, and we'll do like an updated tier ranking once we get closer to the season, because there's definitely going to be some changes. Tennessee, they were in tier 2, but I feel like that cluster of teams in the SEC that was in tier 2 could probably be split into 2 different tiers, and I would put Tennessee in the lower tier, so we would maybe add an additional tier. Same thing with like Iowa State. They were in tier 2. I would probably have them a little bit below BYU and Arizona State, but I would still have them above some of those teams that were in our original tier 3. So we will do new tier rankings, and there probably will be an additional tier in there to kind of split up that second tier. Anyway, so Tennessee, again, this was with Nico gone and all that. I have a hard time seeing this team in the top 10, but could I see them at 9-3? I mean, yeah, their schedule is very favorable. So Tennessee, interesting there at number 10. And again, this is not even necessarily how the rankings would look if these were the records, because then you have to, account for strength of schedule and all that. But this, again, is just based off of those win totals. Tennessee at 9.15. Then we've got Miami at number 11, 8.95 wins. Ole Miss, 8.85 wins. Clemson at 8.8 wins. So this is another interesting one here. If I was going to redo these tiers, I would have Clemson in tier number 1. I would not have them in tier number 2, because I do believe they're a top 5 team. And so that would actually change. I don't have the number exactly, but it was 10.05 or something like that. So that would actually push Clemson to 10-2. And so, maybe we should just redo this whole thing once we figure out, do more research on the teams and figure out those tiers. But again, this is based off of our tiers from the spring. Clemson 8.8, but again, I think a more fair projection is 10-2 for them. So there's something there. Indiana 8.7 wins, and Michigan 8.65 wins, coming in at number 15. All right, let's move on to 16 through 20. Now, Louisville stands out here. This was a tier number 3 team, all the way up at number 16, 8.25 wins. That means they have a favorable schedule. Watch out for Louisville. You've got South Carolina, number 17, 8.15 wins. Missouri, another tier 3 team, all the way up to 8.15 wins because they have a favorable schedule. SMU, same thing. And Florida, they're a tier 2 team, but you see them behind some of these tier 3 teams because their schedule is tougher. 8.1 wins for the Gators. All right, moving on. We've got Georgia Tech at number 21, 8.1 wins. Texas Tech, 8.05. Then we've got Texas A&M, 8 wins. This is a tier 2 team all the way down at number 23. They've got a pretty tough schedule. LSU at number 24, 7.9 wins, another tier 2 team that's lower because of their schedule. And Minnesota at 7.85 wins. They're at number 25. So again, based off of win totals, this would be your top 25. I don't think it would go exactly like that. I think you'd see some teams with worse records ahead of teams with better records just because of the strength of schedules, like I mentioned. All right, let's move on to 26. There's Alabama. Alabama is a tier 2 team all the way down at number 26, 7.75 wins. They have a very tough schedule. Iowa State has a pretty tough schedule, 7.7 wins. There's Baylor at 7.6, Nebraska at number 29, 7.55, and Virginia at number 30, 7.5 wins. So Virginia is our first tier 4 team to make an appearance in the rankings. That means Virginia has a very favorable schedule. So, that's really the biggest takeaway here. It has more to do with the schedules than I think really how good these teams are going to be. And we'll give you the top 10 toughest and top 10 easiest schedules. Those videos will be coming up here very soon. But Virginia, number 30. Then we go to number 31. That's Colorado, 7.45. Same thing for Kansas State. Auburn at 33, 7.35 wins. USC, 7.15. And number 34. And then North Carolina at 7.15. So you see, Colorado, Auburn, USC, these are tier 3 teams, a little bit lower in the rankings because they have tough schedules. All right, 36, I should say. Kansas, 7.05 wins. That would be a nice increase from where they were last year. Oklahoma, 6.9. Same for Pittsburgh. Iowa, 6.85. So Oklahoma is also a tier 3 team all the way down at 37. I believe they're the lowest ranked. Well, no, Iowa and Oklahoma here, the lowest ranked tier 3 teams. That tells us Oklahoma and Iowa have very tough schedules. Washington also at 6.85. They're number 40. Moving on, 41, Virginia Tech 6.6 wins. Utah 6.35. Vandy 6.25. Houston 6.15. And California, Cal at 6.1. So these are the teams that are, you feel decent about them getting to a bowl game. You feel like that's probably the expectation. But we're going to start to get to the teams that really are right there on the edge. Will they make a bowl? Will they not? We got Michigan State at 46, right there at 6. Same thing with TCU. Then just under 6-6, we got Wake Forest at number 48, 5.95 wins. They have a very, very favorable schedule because they're actually in the bottom tier, but they're like 2 games above our worst team. So that's interesting. Very, very favorable schedule for Wake Forest. Arkansas, 5.95 wins, and UCLA, 5.75 wins. Now, 51 through 55, Duke at 5.75 wins. That's another team that I think I would probably raise up a tier. I've done more research on these teams. Duke actually I think is going to be better than I originally thought. That would change their projection. Maryland 5.65, Cincinnati 5.55, Florida State 5.5. Remember, we can only move teams up or down by 1 tier. I think Florida State probably jumps up another tier potentially, and that might get their projection up over that 6-win total. Syracuse 5.5 wins. Their schedule is a lot tougher than the one they had last year. So Syracuse, I think it could be a struggle for them just to get to a bowl game this year. Very tough schedule. All right, 56 is UCF at 5.5 wins. NC State 5.45. Oklahoma State 5.4. West Virginia 5.3. And Wisconsin all the way down at 5.1. They've got a really tough schedule. You would expect NC State to do better than that. That seems like a pretty low number, but again, that's what it came out when we did the projection. And then we got 61 Arizona, 5.05 wins. Boston College, 5 wins. Kentucky, 4.85. Northwestern, 4.5. And Rutgers, 4.45. This is a team with a lot of experience coming back. I think Rutgers probably, was not treated very well with these projections. Again, we'll see where they wind up in my new tier rankings when we get there. But Rutgers, again, at 65 seems kind of low. Otherwise, I think these are pretty fair. And then finally, we got Stanford at 3.85, Purdue at 3.1, and then Mississippi State 2.75. I mentioned Wake Forest being 2 games ahead of the bottom team. They're actually 3 wins ahead of Mississippi State. Remember, they were close to 6 wins. Mississippi State's right down there at under 3 wins. So these are the teams that I think, if I'm looking at teams that will not make a bowl game, these are the 3 teams I would say it's most likely that they do not make a bowl game, and I feel very confident in saying that. Again, you never know. Teams can change. The transfer portal can completely change teams around, and maybe one of these teams surprises. But they've got tough schedules. They're not expected to be very good, and that's why you see them at the bottom. So would love to get your takeaways from this. What's something you notice here that that jumps out? Illinois right off the bat. Again, for me, that's a huge takeaway. Illinois, I think, is a real playoff contender, even if they're just a top 25 team because of their schedule. I think they have a real shot to get to the playoff. And again, some of those other takeaways in there that I mentioned, but we'd love to get your takeaways, your thoughts. Let me know what you think about all this down in the comments below.